What's going on, traders, and welcome back to another YouTube video. So in today's video, we're going to go through uh, my outlook of the markets, and I'm going to focus specifically on the synthetic markets since that's what my focus is currently on, right? What I try to do is I try not to dilute my focus too much. So if I'm focused in on the synthetics market, I'm not going to worry too much about what's happening in other markets, right? As we're in the last part of the last quarter of the year, we can expect to see volumes die down in other markets. Whereas as we're in the synthetic markets, I haven't necessarily noticed much of a change in terms of the behavior. There's still quite good volumes in this market and so forth. So I'll generally focus on this market towards the end of the year. So going into it, before I get into it, let me just throw in my little disclaimer. Remember, I'm not licensed nor qualified to offer financial investment or trading advice. Everything I speak about on these videos is purely my own opinion and my own approach to the marketplace. I do not recommend trading live funds. If you do so, however, ensure that you do it with capital that you are willing to risk, and make sure you do your own research, because the marketplace is a very risky business. So let's talk about volatility 50 on, let's start with the weekly chart very quickly. So on the weekly, we can still see that volatility 50 was in a, let me just grab a pin. Okay, so we can see that overall volatility 50, as we look at it, is in an overall downtrend, right? So we had a break of the structure at this area here, which means that this was the last lower high. This is the last lower low. There's a lower high being formed right now, and based on what we can see happening is it is failing to break market structure. So if we have a lower high, lower low, lower high formation, we would expect to see that then translate into a lower low. The fact that price is failing to break this area in here is telling us that we are most likely on a short-term bullish run at the moment. So what I would be expecting is to see price come above these wicks and trade into some of these areas in here, right? So overall, I would be looking to see this area in here more or less get filled prior to price making a decision on whether it's going to go lower to come and maybe manipulate these equal lows before going higher, or whatever it's going to do thereafter. But overall, looking at this, I can see that I have a bullish outlook on the market for a pullback. Looking at the daily chart, right? Coming down to the daily chart, we can clearly see that, again, we can translate that the market is in a very bearish trend. We had a break of structure at this area, which means there was a higher high, lower low, lower high, and this was the first lower low formed in this marketplace. So that means that our overall trading range right now, as far as I'm concerned, will be inside of this box in here, right? Outside of this box, I would consider manipulation. So price then traded down, manipulated these lows. What I would be expecting to see is price trading just above this high and then most likely pulling back, right? The reason I say that is I believe that there would be liquidity above this high. So looking in this area here, I will be looking to see if price trades above into this area, and then I'll most likely be looking for sells to the downside. Areas that I can focus in on in this market would be more or less in and around this area in here, due to this bit of imbalance that we can see in there. Not my concept, however, not something that I'm going to discuss in detail on this channel at any given point, but there is a lot of information on YouTube if you want to go and study what that specifically means. So looking at the marketplace for this week going forward, given that we have now our lower low, lower high, lower low, we're now looking to see if this is going to result in a liquidity grab above this high to go lower, right? Or a liquidity above this high to come and retest something in here and then go higher. Overall, however, this would be the area where I would expect sales to happen. So scenario number one, I'm looking at sales happening at this area, back down into around there, and then back up, right? But if price does break above here, then I would still be looking to take sales back down into this area, say from around in here, right? Going down to the 1 hour time frame, you can see that on the 1 hour time frame, we can see that we had a bit of a die down in momentum as price started approaching this area here, which is basically this zone that you can see here on the daily. So as price approached that area, we can see that it has slowed down, right? We can see that when price hit that area, it immediately gave a reaction to the downside. So if we drop down to the 15-minute time frame, we can see that it did essentially give a break of market structure, a pullback, and another break of market structure to the downside. So overall, right now, looking at this, it's showing us signs that momentum is switching to the downside. However, what I would expect to see is price perhaps coming back into this high, right? Price coming back into this high, perhaps even higher than this high to manipulate it before it goes lower. So for now, I'm still looking at perhaps a pullback into somewhere around here, or perhaps even lower, and then I'll look to perhaps take a buyback up into that area in there. Overall, however, from the zone, I am looking to see price sort of switch over and go lower. Obviously, that would come in the form of seeing a switch in behavior on the lower time frames. So that's essentially what I would be looking at on there. So coming down to volatility 10, we're going to look at the weekly time frame again. So looking at the weekly, can see again, volatility 10 has been in a long-term downtrend, right? We can see that we had this lower high, which broke market structure, forming this lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. We had this push to the upside, which broke market structure. I'm considering this as one push, right? So from here to there is one push to the upside. I'm expecting that to essentially have been a liquidity grab, which would mean that price would want to come back below these lows at some point, right? For now, it has traded below this. Whoa. For now, it has traded below this low in here. So I'm expecting to see some sort of a bullish reaction. This is an automatic reaction that you would see when price trades into an area of sensitivity, right? An area where there's either buy orders sitting in that area or sell orders sitting in that area. You would generally see, even if you have a high momentum move into that area, we generally see some sort of a minor reaction. So as we can see in here, what I am currently looking to see is price trading into some of these imbalance areas in here, and most likely filling this area up, right? So for now, that would be my overall targets in this sort of market to the upside. But looking at that, I am bullish. So looking at the daily time frame, I need to have a proper understanding of what's happening on here in terms of structure, right? So we can see on the daily time frame that we are still in a bearish trend. There's that weekly break that we can see, but on the daily, the first break obviously came at this area in here. We then had the structure created. We had this push to the downside, creating that lower low. From that lower high, we had this lower high create this lower low in here. So overall, we're still in that bearish range, but we can see that we had a very strong move from the downside in here. So for now, what we want to understand is, was this level of resistance? So we can see here with these 1, 2, 3, 4 candles, there was a level of resistance that was built up in here. So price resisted multiple times. We could say that it's a result of that support that was previously formed in there. So what we could do is we could look at this entire area as one in here, right? And we can see now that price has broken above it and it's now come to retest. The question, however, would be, do we see price now flying up from that area, or would we expect to see it trade a bit deeper into this area before going higher? That kind of answers will only obviously come in on the lower time frame, but looking at the daily right now, I would expect to see this market more or less continue to push higher before it goes lower, right? So what I'm currently expecting is something like that, perhaps back down into here and then go higher from that area in there. So for now, that's what we're looking at on volatility 10. If we drop down to the H1 time frame, we can see that we're currently in a bearish run at the moment. And I say that because we can clearly see at this point in here, we had a break of market structure, right? We had another break of structure, another break of structure. So a lot of structure was broken with this in here. So we're currently in a bearish leg at the moment of the marketplace. What I am currently expecting is I'm expecting to see this market sort of come down, perhaps come back up into around these areas in here, right? Because this was the last area that we did break. And once that happens, I'm expecting to see it come back at least below this low in here before we see that switch and the market going higher. However, ideally, I would like to see it come back down into here before I look to take any buys back to the upside. Overall, looking at volatility 10, I would be looking to participate in buys in this marketplace. Looking at volatility 25 on the weekly time frame, another market that we can say that has been in a long-term bearish trend, but just focusing on what we can see right in here, we can see that we had these higher high created there. We had this break of market structure in here, which means that was a higher high, lower low, lower high, and now we're seeing price most likely forming a lower low in here, which means that no matter what in this area, we would expect to see some sort of a pullback, right? If price is going to form a lower low, it's going to look to push higher and form a lower high or a higher high thereafter. Or even if price doesn't form a lower low in this area, we'd still look to see that pullback. Why? Because then essentially it will come back to form a higher high, right, higher low, and then it would change structure to the upside. Apologies for my annotations being so messy, but it's just a matter of communicating what's essentially on my mind. So when I look at this area in here, what I'm looking for is I was essentially looking to see price come back into the zone in here, and that is essentially where I was looking to participate in buys. What you can see is prices come very, very close to it. However, it did not tap into my zone. I am hoping to see that happening during the course of this week, and then I'll be looking to participate in buys back to the upside from there. So looking currently at this, let me just grab my fib from here to there. Yeah, it's nowhere near an area where I would actually look to buy now. I would actually expect this to be a manipulation and see a drive lower from there, or an induction, we can call it that. So looking at this on the daily time frame, we've got this last break to the downside in here of this market structure, which means that the current bearish range is inside of here, right? So we'll be looking to see if price is going to look to come back up into anywhere in these areas here before we look to take shorts back down. However, if price does come down into this area first prior to that happening, then I'll be looking to participate in buys back to the upside. Overall, looking at this for now, I'd say there's nothing we can actually participate in other than sells, right? I would say sells in this market would be much easier as opposed to buys, because currently we have no sort of switch in the momentum in this marketplace, right? Moving on from that, let's talk about volatility 75 very quickly. 75, this is still a zone on the weekly chart that I am expecting to see price come back into for me to participate in the long-term buys to the upside. We can see, however, that price is really struggling to get back down into this area. But for now, that is the area that I am currently looking at. So if we look at the daily time frame, on the daily time frame, we can see this big bullish push to the upside that broke market structure, right? So this is currently our lower low that created a higher high, right? So now it's currently creating a what? A higher low, and we would most likely want to see if this higher low translates into a higher high, right? But remember, price has not tapped into the weekly zone that I am looking for. So I essentially am not expecting to see it go and create a higher high before coming back into the zone, right? So for now, if I look into this, I can see that we had some bearish structure created in here. Lower high failed to create a lower low, break of market structure to the upside, and then we can see price sort of trickling down into this area. So for now, based on this last break in market structure here to the upside, we would actually expect to see price maybe pushing further back into this range, right, prior to coming lower. So that's essentially my idea currently in this marketplace, based solely on this last break of market structure. Let's be very careful of how we basically navigate this market, because it is a very hard to understand one right now, given that we're in an overall bullish break in a bearish trend, right? But we're in a bearish leg of that bullish break, right? So it's a crazy one to interpret right now as to what's happening. So for me, I would just want to see if I can perhaps participate in something up into there, and then maybe something back down, and then something up from there, right? So looking at that, let's see. Structure. Yeah, I'm still very keen on seeing the market get below these lows, however. But let's see if we got any bullish opportunities on here. There's nothing that's really bullish right now as far as I'm concerned. I would still expect to see this market just keep smashing lower, right? So For now, I would be looking at this area in here. And if the market does bounce into this area, then I'll be looking to see if it can come back down into here, or even just get above here and then come back down into here. Moving on to step index on the weekly chart, you can see overall bearish trend as well. All of these markets have actually been in a bearish trend, with the exception of 75. So looking at this on the weekly, we can see that we had this bullish reaction on the weekly, which did trade above this previous high, right? We can see a wick above that high. So that's showing us willingness to want to go higher. However, the fact that price is currently retracing is telling us that there's no momentum to go above that high. So what we want to see is price coming back into an area of interest where there's most likely going to be volume, and we'll look to see if price can pick up those orders and use that momentum to go higher. So looking at the daily chart, we can clearly see on the daily chart that we had this last low that was broken here by this high. We had a break of market structure here to the upside, right? I'm not sure why I didn't mark this one. And then this would have been the second break of market structure to the upside. We then also had a break of this swing high, right? So this is the overall swing high that created the swing low. And then this is just market structure inside of it, right? So looking at this, I would want to see price come back down into around this area here, as that would be the next area of value that I would believe where there'd be orders sitting. And then from there, I would expect to see this price sort of maybe go higher, or at least revisit this previous high in here. So that's basically it on this chart. I haven't really gone into this analysis deeper than that. What I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to basically focus on the higher time frame setups and look at basically capitalizing on that and try to minimize the amount of time I spend on the chart actively. So hopefully this session has been informative. You've got enough information out of it. If you have any questions, any other things you want us to look at, be sure to drop it down in the comments, and I'll be sure to catch up with you guys on the next video. Until next time, it has been a pleasure as always to share with you guys, and I am wishing you a blessed and a profitable trading week.